Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Have you ever been in a wilderness season? That's a period of time where you feel like your faith is on the rocks. You are not sure what God is doing. You might be facing despair or doubt or discouragement. You might be waiting on something or mourning a loss. Well, I would say this passage that we're going to look at today is a remedy for a season like that. Hey, it's Jen. Welcome back to the Bible for Busy People. And this week, a lot of people are observing Ash Wednesday, which kicks off the season of Lent, which leads up to Easter Sunday. So we have a lot to look forward to. And I thought it would be only fitting this week to do a series on scriptures that talk about dust and dirt, because there are many, and they have fascinating implications for our faith and for our walk with God. So even if you don't observe Ash Wednesday or Lent, you might learn something about it this week, and you'll get a lot out of these passages. I know I did. Today we're talking about Isaiah chapter 40, and we're not going to be able to read the whole thing today, but we're going to read verses 12 to 31, and it does talk about dust, so pay attention, listen for that, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. Starting in verse 12, it says, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or marked off the heavens with the span of his hand? Who has gathered the dust of the earth in a measure, or weighed the mountains on a balance, and the hills on the scales? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or gave him counsel? Who did he consult? Who gave him understanding and taught him the paths of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? Look, the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are considered as a speck of dust on the scales. He lifts up the islands like fine dust. Lebanon's cedars are not enough for fuel, or its animals enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are considered by him as empty nothingness. With whom will you compare God? What likeness will you set up for comparison with him? An idol? Something that a smelter casts and a metal worker plates with gold and makes silver chains for? A poor person contributes wood for a pedestal that will not rot. He looks for a skilled craftsman to set up an idol that will not fall over. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not considered the foundations of the earth? God is enthroned above the circle of the earth. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like thin cloth and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He reduces princes to nothing and makes judges of the earth like a wasteland. They are barely planted, barely sown. Their stem hardly takes root in the ground when he blows on them, and they wither, and a whirlwind carries them away like stubble. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up and see. Who created these? He brings out the stars by number. He calls all of them by name. Because of his great power and strength, not one of them is missing. Jacob, why do you say, and Israel, why do you assert, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my claim is ignored by my God? Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to his understanding. He gives strength to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. So in this passage, in verses 12 and 14, it talks about dust and dirt. And what a visual that is, to think about all the huge nations on earth and all of the continents. They're like specks of dust on the scales. Idols are brought up, which we talked about last week, how idols are made by human hands and can do nothing. They have no control, they have no power, and how far above them God is. I think that is an incredible reminder right there. This whole chapter parallels passages in Job and might have actually been inspired by Job because they were written around the same time, especially the last few chapters. And if you'll remember, if you've read Job before, Job had gotten to a place of just frustration and anger with God, and he actually questions God. You could say he was in a wilderness season with God, and then God responds, "Okay, let's talk about it." He gives Job questions back. He says things like, "Who has measured the waters of the world in the hollows of his hand?" God calls attention to his power and his sovereignty by asking questions back. And I think all of these passages are meant to be sobering. I don't think they're meant to be shaming. I think he may be trying to put Job in his place a little bit, but in a way of saying, this is who I am before you, and this is who you are before me. Like, let's be real. Let's get it all out there. So what are we meant to get out of passages like this? Well, I think they help us to remember who God is. Like in the Bible where it says God remembers people, and we're like, well, did God forget them? Is that why he has to remember them? No, not exactly. Like in the story of Hannah, where it says God remembers her, doesn't mean that God forgot her, but I think maybe it means that he considered the full extent of the situation and it prompted him to act. And I think it's the same with God. Like, we know he's there. It's not like we forget about God, but we don't quite remember all of who he is, all of what he can do. And I think it really prompts us to turn to him, even in the hardest situations, even in our wilderness seasons. Passages like this remind us that God is almighty and he can do what we can't. So even if we haven't seen him work in this situation, we know he's powerful enough to do it. It also reminds us that God is sovereign over the workings of the world, over timelines, over human authority. God is bigger. He's exalted higher. And so even if we don't know quite what he's doing, we know that he is above all of it. We also see that God is limitless. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't need to take a vacation. He doesn't have scarcity or lack. He is abundant and he's limitless. And we are the limited ones. We're the ones that get tired. We're the ones that need to be renewed, and he's the one that provides that for us. And that's the last point, is that God is good, and he is in the business of renewing and restoring his creation to its original goodness that he created it with. God is familiar with all of our ways. He knows that we wear out fast and that we can only take so much, and he is not in the habit of leaving us in this place. So whatever it is that you're going through today, whatever wilderness season you're walking, I pray that you can take the encouragement that's in this passage and the things that we're reminded of about who God is and what he can do, and continue to turn toward him, continue to trust him until you make your way through this season. I'm so excited to chat with you a little bit more tomorrow on more passages about dust and dirt.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.